And on to another very important development today. A massive constitutional showdown in the United States, and the Supreme Court of the country has delivered its verdict. The Trump administration's push to end birthright citizenship has hit a legal wall, with the court backing the long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment. The ruling keeps intact the principle that those born on U.S. soil are citizens, triggering a fresh political battle over immigration, executive power, and the future of American identity. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court completely dismantles Donald Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship in a historic 6-3 verdict. Writing for the sweeping majority, Chief Justice John Roberts has issued a devastating legal rebuke to the White House. The nation's top judge completely shredded the administration's legal arguments, stating bluntly that there was scant evidence provided by the Trump administration for its revisionist view. Declaring the 14th Amendment an absolute ironclad shield, Roberts affirmed that the 14th Amendment extends citizenship rights to every free-born person in the land of America. In a legacy-defining final sentence that permanently locks in the absolute right to citizenship by birth, the Chief Justice has declared, "We keep that promise today, an absolute tectonic defeat for executive overreach." Now, before we dive deep into the judgment, let's tell you more about the American dream. The American dream has always been linked to the promise of citizenship. But how does one actually become an American citizen? That pathway is not just about birth on U.S. soil. It can come through other means as well, through American parents, for instance, years of legal residency, as well as marriage, military service, adoption, or through naturalized parents as well. At the center of America's citizenship debate is the 14th Amendment, a constitutional guarantee written into law after the Civil War by the father of the 14th Amendment, Representative John Bingham of Ohio. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment of U.S. Constitution lays down 3 key principles. Those born or naturalized in U.S. are citizens. States cannot strip citizens of their rights, and no person can be denied life, liberty, property, or equal protection without due process of law. So what was the executive order that was passed by Trump in his bid to deny the U.S. citizenship? No U.S. citizenship for children born in the U.S. to parents who are in the country illegally. No U.S. citizenship for children born in the U.S. to parents on temporary visas as well. Let's now tell you, how did the opinions of the U.S. Supreme Court justices weigh in this landmark judgment? The majority, including Chief Justice Roberts, held that the 14th Amendment citizenship clause is a clear rule tied to birth on U.S. soil. Justice Kavanaugh agreed that the executive order must fall, but based his reasoning on existing federal law, while the 3 dissenting justices backed a narrower interpretation of constitutional jurisdiction. Now, this is not the first time that the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down major initiatives introduced by Trump by executive order. In fact, this is the second time this year that the Supreme Court has come down hard on the Trump administration. The first was when it came down on the trade tariffs. U.S. Supreme Court struck down Trump's global trade tariffs as well. And they very clearly, of course, called Trump's move an overreach of the IEEPA laws as well. Second, when it came to the travel ban, that Trump had imposed severe curbs on 39 travel ban nations. Judges struck down this decision, blocking asylum and green cards to individuals from those particular states as well, or those countries as well. There's now the issue of proof of citizenship, where the federal judges have struck down parts of Trump's executive order when it comes to polls. In fact, the clause seeking documentary citizenship for voting has been struck down. Citizenship proof for voting has now been struck down as well. Let's quickly open this up and take it across to our guests who are joining us. With us is Adolph Franco, who's a close aide of President Trump and a Republican strategist. He's also a former surrogate for Donald Trump's 2016 and 2024 presidential campaigns. Rekha Sharma Crawford, immigration attorney, is also with us, and the second VP for the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And let me come across to you first. Adolph Franco, certainly not a very good day for President Trump, because one of his key executive orders has been struck down by a 6-3 ruling of the Supreme Court.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Let me speak more broadly to your introduction. I think it was selective when you said that these are major decisions against President Trump. President Trump has won significant victories on the immigration front. He also won a major transgender case today that was very polarizing in the United States. So you highlighted on President Trump's setbacks on the Supreme Court without highlighting his many, many victories, which of course has been the criticism of the opposition party and Democrats, saying the opposite of what you presented, saying the court is largely a rubber stamp of President Trump. That has been the accusation, which of course is not true. Their decisions have been mixed. But with regard to this specific decision, President Trump himself, after he heard the case, he attended for the first time the Supreme Court hearing, said that this is likely to go against him. But it was a statement of principle that he was stating. So he didn't expect this result. I disagree with this being sweeping. Sweeping is 9-0, 8-1. Most observers here in the United States did not expect 3 justices to dissent in the first instance. Secondly, I disagree with the court because what was contemplated here, we can debate this, the 14th Amendment had to do with slavery. There's a clause you didn't put up on your screen which says subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which means if there were illegals, arguably the children who are subject to the jurisdiction of what the parents are coming from since they're minor, so they wouldn't be U.S. citizens. So there's a slavery component here that was well over 100 and now almost 150 years ago. This was done for that purpose. What the reality is today is that there's tourism to have babies in the United States, a lot of it coming from China and other countries, and people born here accidentally. I don't think that was ever the intent of the framers when they did the 14th Amendment. That's very clear. The question is whether you want to stick to something original language to look at, which is also arguable, or whether one looks at the context of what's really going on in the country today.
Yeah, but Mr. Franco, the point that many are making is that you'll then have to change the law. Let me bring in Rekha on that. Rekha, the law may have been envisaged differently over a century ago or a century and a half ago. The point that's being made over here is that ultimately you have to then change the law if you feel that the law is not, befitting today's time. But the court clearly has not agreed with the executive order route that President Trump has taken.
May I say something quickly on this?
Yeah, Rekha, please, sir, and then I'm coming to you.
Well, I think it's really interesting that, they want to raise originalism when it's to their convenience, but not originalism when they want to have the Constitution interpreted in the way the Constitution is written. The Constitution, the Chief Justice does an extraordinary job going through the history of American, citizenship and how we got there and what the foundings meant and what the foundings did not mean. So in this instance, where you have, the administration say, well, that's not really how the original founding fathers designed the citizenship provisions to work, and that it's really coming out of Reconstructionism and slavery. Yes, there is a component of that. But there is also a very strong component that says the original doctrine was meant to address people who were born of this soil. That is the verbiage that was used. That is the terminology that was used. And that's what the court upheld today.
You want to respond to that at all?
Yes, if I may. I have a lot of respect for that point of view, and it's an argument to be made. I don't know the other guests' views on other issues. But when it comes to other rights, for example, gun rights and Second Amendment rights, the same proponents that are arguing this argument on birthright said, well, the founders didn't really contemplate automatic weapons and the rest of it, and we have to interpret things in modern terms. This is, of course, the view of most liberals, whether it's abortion, whether it's gun control, whether it's religious freedom. So on this one, all of a sudden, they're being strict when it's convenient. The reality is, if you take their logic, did you really think the people who drafted this had in mind anchor babies coming from China that give birth to, they could just have 1.5 million Chinese born on tourist visas? Obviously, the answer is no. But your question was the right question. Was this a place for Congress? Congress has passed a number of laws, and that would have been the preferred vehicle. The problem is, here's a political reality. Congress is non-functioning body. So we're impossible to move things in Congress today of this magnitude. But you're absolutely correct. The best for this.
That's the problem for governments everywhere across the world. Just because it's difficult to pass a law in an assembly or a parliament or a senate or a Congress, that doesn't mean you take a legal short circuit.
But this is a national crisis. But this is a national crisis here with what's happening and the manipulation, whether it's immigration or whether it's just birthright deal to get illegal immigration. It is a problem. It is a significant problem. The question is, does the courts, which liberals have advocated for, be far more involved in deciding policy issues, as the liberals have on other issues?
Let me bring Rekha in on that. Rekha, are courts now entering the domain of policy? Because he says it's a national crisis.
No, I think they already have. I think that I know that the individual indicates that the Supreme Court hasn't always sided with the Trump administration. This Supreme Court has, in fact, sided with the administration, even when I think that the law is clearly not where it should have gone. They have overturned decades and centuries of legislation and interpretation, quite honestly. So I don't know that this Supreme Court has as clean hands as my colleague there would submit. But beyond that, though, I think the other issue here is this, is if you look at the dissenters' view on what they interpreted, in some regards, not only would Donald Trump not be a citizen of the United States, neither would Justice Thomas. So it's rather interesting that they have taken this position where it would actually cut against them. Congress did, in fact, pass legislation as it relates to citizenship and mimic the language of the Constitution exactly. So there wasn't a disconnect between Congress and the Constitution. They parroted it and mirrored it in the exact same way. So this isn't about passing new laws or passing laws. I would agree. I would 100% agree with my friend that Congress is pretty much incapable of passing anything at this point, which is a crisis unto itself. But I don't know that there is actually a disconnect between the constitutional language and the statutory language in the INA.
Mr. Franco, the problem is also this. In India, as well as in other countries, what's being perceived is that in the United States, what you might call a national crisis is also being seen as the rise of a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric, which impacts citizens whose origin is perhaps India and other countries. And that's something that, has been given rise to by these sort of actions against immigration. Of course, any country has a right to crack down on illegal immigrants. But even in this case, those who are working there legally, if their children are going to be denied this right, it becomes a bit problematic then.
Well, I don't think you have a right to have babies if you're on a visa. That's my point. And I don't think it's an anti-immigrant issue at all. It's an anti-illegal immigration issue.
Hold on. So you're saying if you're working in the country on a long-term visas, hold on to your babies. Don't have babies. Is that the logic here?
This has turned into a tool for illegal immigration. And anybody who looks at this objectively sees it, whether you want to call that a crisis.
Well, then don't give them the visas. Don't give them the visas. If couples are going to come and get visas to work in a country, obviously they're going to have babies.
But I mean, what could you imagine if I told you on this program that we're not going to let any tourism in the country? People can. I have a friend who was born technically because the mother came pregnant in New York.
I'm not talking about tourism. I understand your point. If tourists are coming and having babies and they're getting citizenship, that's a different argument. If there are professionals who your economy is benefiting from, if they are going to live there in your country for a few years, no one's going to stop them from having babies.
Right, but my point is, do you believe a tourist that comes and has a baby because she had premature labor should be a U.S. citizen?
So take action against them if you believe it's a violation. You can take action. But the point is, you're in one broad swath, you're bringing in a whole lot of sections of society, which is perhaps unreasonable. But Rekha wants to respond to you. Let Rekha come in on this. Rekha, please.
On to that. This is propaganda in its finest form. Like this is absolutely the administration of pro-birth, pro-life until birth. In which case, they always want to say, we support birth, we want to have children, we support support children's rights until they're born. Actually, not even until they're born, because they want to strip away any kind of efforts that there are to protect the mother or the mother's right, even in the case of incest and rape. That's a separate issue. But the issue that this idea, this propaganda machine that keeps saying that people are coming solely to the United States for purposes of giving birth, there's no data, no statistics that support that.
Really?
And there has been. Yes, there has been no statistics that show that an overwhelming.
Well, my friend who's an immigration lawyer should look at.
What I am saying to you is there is no statistics that say an overwhelming majority of people come into the United States for the sole purpose of giving birth. That number does not exist.
You are seriously misinformed or blind to something. There are 1.5 million Chinese that had these visas into the Mariana Islands, which is a territory that's called birth tourism, that Democrats in Congress recognize as an issue. Now, to your question, as an anchor, you were right. These loopholes should be closed and denying visas. They're complicated, but
Mr. Franco, you could have deported these individuals. And if your arguments which you're making, so persuasive arguments that you're making here, why did they fail before the Supreme Court?
No, you don't deport these individuals. These individuals are coming legally because there's a loophole in the law to allow them to, for example, 1.5 million to travel to the Mariana Islands on a tourist visa through China and have babies. They're called anchor babies. This is recognized by the Democratic side. Now, what should have been done,
Sir, you have a robust visa and a robust scanning process. Surely you can prevent couples from coming together if this is indeed such a huge problem that millions of people are coming in. So, I mean, it's largely an issue of how you grant your visas. You can build in those safeguards. If you say there's a loophole, there's possibly a solution too. But because of that one problem, perhaps you shouldn't be brushing everybody with one brush.
It is a logical and far more logical thing to say these people never should be allowed to become citizens if they come and they technically give birth in the United States.
Okay, and that's why things become extremely problematic when there are, extremely strong language used, and perhaps the Supreme Court has proved to be the voice of reason. I don't know what the Trump administration is going to do next, but we'll have to leave it there. Rekha Sharma, as well as Adolfo Franco, thank you so much for joining us this evening.